What I want to talk to you today is about a project where we looked at monitoring of social media to identify hubs of misinformation regarding health. Of course, there's a lot of previous studies that focus on this, and especially looking at those that are most active in sharing and discussing health topics on social media may in fact be less knowledgeable. This can, of course, exacerbate problems related to the rapid spread of misinformation. One of the things that we focused on at Boston University, where I've worked before and maintain an affiliation, as well as Kansas State University, where I'm now a research chair, is that we look at network analysis as a way to identify hubs of misinformation and influential users. So we use a variety of metrics to identify who is influential in terms of not only what's being said, but how it's being communicated and passed through the network. So we use a series of metrics from network analysis to identify those. Typically, we size our nodes using what's known as the betweenness centrality algorithm. We identify communities by applying the modularity algorithm to color our graphs, and then we spatialize them using underlying network structures. I think the most important thing here for us is that these are starting points for us to identify not only hubs of quality information, but also potential hubs of misinformation. So this is a way for us to start looking at users and then to dive into content, but also to look at profiles and to get a better sense of who is saying what to whom and with what effect. So very briefly, I'm going to introduce this not only as a process, but also as a platform that perhaps all of you may be interested to engage, which we offer for free, and that collects hundreds of millions of units of data on an ongoing basis. So here's a couple of examples. Over the years, we've looked at antibiotics and antimicrobial resistance. Of course, it doesn't take much effort here to figure out who is influential in talking about antibiotics here, right? If you can't make Hillary Clinton, indeed. So what does Hillary Clinton have to do with antibiotics? I see a few nods, shakings of the head. So this data was collected over the course of some years. We have about 2.5 million units. Hillary Clinton is quote unquote influential in discussing antibiotics because she had pneumonia in 2016 when she was running for president, which meant that many people went online and say, hey, Hillary, because you have pneumonia, you should get some antibiotics. Now, what's interesting about this graph is that it's wrong. This is what's known as an undirected graph, which is to say it doesn't look at what Hillary Clinton was actually saying and doing around the topic. She didn't tweet at all about antibiotics. But what this allows us to do is to identify ways to leverage our message such that we can move indicators around topics like antibiotics and whether or not she really should be seeking treatment for her pneumonia with antibiotics or not, because as you may know, pneumonia itself can be viral or bacterial. And if it's viral, it wouldn't actually benefit from being treated. If we change the nature of our graph just a little bit, it can be more correct, and we can identify here many other nodes of so-called ordinary users who are also likewise influential in discussing this topic. Now, the challenge here, of course, is to filter the wheat from the chaff, which is to say some of these users may be spreading misinformation. Some of them may be spreading quality information. But this, again, is why it is a useful, we think, starting point, because we can take literally hundreds of millions of posts. We can filter them down to the most influential users. We can identify communities. And typically, when we look at those colors of the community, usually those folks are sharing information with one another that is either of a high quality or low quality nature. So it makes our jobs essentially a lot easier to root out sources of misinformation if they do exist. Of course, this gets us to the next level, which is to say we can look at text. And I was at one of the panels earlier today, and we mentioned the importance of humor. Over the course of a year, looking at full fire hose access to Twitter data, the most retweeted post was about antibiotics. Doctor, why did you take your antibiotic medicine at 6 a.m. when I told you 9 a.m.? Patient, I wanted to surprise the bacteria. Humor, right? This is the most shared tweet about antibiotics in our data set, which covers everything over the course of the year. So we can use these sorts of things in an effective way, even though, of course, we know that surprising bacteria may not be effective in helping to treat whatever condition we have. So the point that I'm trying to illustrate here is that we have a wide range of users sharing a wide, diverse body of content. The first user there, Akasha Shanghai, Shanghazi, is an ordinary person. Not an expert in antibiotics or microbial resistance, but nonetheless has the most retweeted post of the whole year. The WHO and More Science News, of course, are a little more established as verified users on the account, which allows us to look at different levels of how information flows through the network and what can be leveraged in that sense, which points back to the Hillary Clinton example. So I'm going to skip a little bit quickly over this just because I believe we're probably straight up out of time, and I think there's still one other presenter. But the way that a lot of this data is collected is through what's known as the Twitter Collection and Analysis Toolkit, which was produced by the Digital Methods Initiative at the University of Amsterdam. Just to say, this thing lives and breathes online and continues to collect data on an ongoing basis from the Stream API, or the so-called garden hose access to Twitter. And you can offload this data to visualize it with Gephi, R, analyze it in Excel, SPSS, so on and so forth. And again, whether or not you're studying antibiotics or you're studying coronavirus, we have at the moment about 8.5 million tweets about the coronavirus, which we started collecting about 2.5 weeks ago. This runs essentially for free. We have about 450 million tweets on a variety of topics on a TCAT that we host on AWS and a series of virtual machines. Why should we really care? We can use this data for a lot of purposes. We can do ethnographies, we can do network analysis, we can look at content, we can look at users. If I had more time, I could give you a little bit of a working demo. But effectively, this data provides pretty clear access to what people are doing in terms of what they're saying, who they're saying it to, whether or not they may be bots or they may be trolls or agents, or they may have, as some of our examples showed earlier, they may have been suspended. That is quite a challenge working in this sort of data, is that accounts that can be influential one day over the period of time disappear because they suspend, the accounts are suspended for violating rules, being bots, among other things. So we have a lot of broad topically agnostic value to this. So if you are interested and you would like to have a look at the data we have, you can go to this URL. I know it's not fancy, but it will get you there. You can use the username KTCAT, password XY123, hat, dash, hat, exclamation mark. Try to keep your data query small. The system can break. It takes a long time to repair. In terms of a working example, I had the question for a demo here. We don't have time. But if you want to have a quick look, as you can see here, we have, as I mentioned, the coronavirus. So we've collected, 9.1 million tweets from February 2nd till now. This will keep collecting data, tweets about this topic until we tell it to stop. I was wrong. I guess we only have 430 million tweets, not 450 million. And there's a variety of ways to query this data set. You can look at it over time. You can include things. You can exclude things. You can drill down. And you can track things. You can identify who's saying what, who's the most, quote unquote, influential. And I know I'm scrolling through this kind of quickly, but the goal here is just to bring to your attention that this is out there. If you want to use it, I'm happy to take questions and support whatever research inquiries you might have in mind. And it's also worth pointing out that these searches are customizable, which is to say, if we're not collecting something that's of interest to you, and from this drop-down you can see all of the many different things that we're collecting data on, from the election to Amazon, Apple, astrology. I started collecting tweets about Bernie being a Russian asset yesterday. 7,700 tweets came back already. Concussions, culture, so on and so forth. A lot of these queries have nothing to do with what I'm interested in, but rather what people in the scholarly community are interested in pursuing. So again, free data, no cost, let me know. And if we do have another speaker, I'm happy to turn the stage over, but also happy to take questions. Thanks for your time.